So throughout this conference, we've had many conversations about community, about bringing people together, about rallying around this thing that we are so passionate about, Ruby on Rails. So today, on this final day, we wanted to bring someone in who could speak to us on those themes of community, of inclusivity, of care. And through mutual colleagues, I was introduced to Shani Boston. And after just 10 minutes in a Zoom room with her, I knew she was the speaker I wanted for this morning. Her energy and her passion is so infectious that I wanted to share it with all of you. So prior to joining MailChimp, Shani spent her time consulting for the US Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, the US Small Business Administration, and several Fortune 500 companies. Her commitment to small business is what brought her to Intuit and what drives her to this day. And since joining MailChimp and Intuit, Shani has worked cross-functionally on numerous strategic initiatives, including retention, international, data analytics, and security and data privacy, just to name a few. Currently, she leads product and engineering operations, overseeing close to 50% of MailChimp's operations. Shani is a proud member of the Pride leadership team and is committed to helping MailChimp Intuit to become the most inclusive and equitable environment possible. So please help me welcome Shani Boston.
Oh man, good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing? Yeah? I heard there was a little bit of late night. I'm from Atlanta. I know about late nights in Atlanta. Have y'all had a late night? Cool, well, I am excited today to talk to you all a little bit about change. I think we've all been on a global change curve for the past several years, but I have had an acute experience recently being a part of an acquisition. And so when Chelsea approached me to come in and talk about my change experience, I was really excited because I was like, I'm gonna share some things, I'm gonna share some bumps in the road, I'm gonna share some honesty with you all, some things about our organizations, how we've been trying to merge two cultures. I hope it's helpful for you, I hope it's helpful for your teams. So to begin with, I'll talk a little bit about myself, like who am I? I'll talk a little bit about kind of what are my change principles, how do I lead? What informs my leadership style. I'll talk a little bit about the context for change. We've been, like I mentioned, we've been a part of a $12 billion acquisition, so it's an opportunity for you to get a little peek behind the windows. And then I'll talk about our change journey. Where are we? What are the big things that we have been going through? How has it felt as an organization? And then some sort of key takeaways and lessons learned. So that's kind of where we're gonna start today. For me, I'll be transparent with you. Change is something that we're all adapting to. Return to work is a whole thing we're negotiating as well. Doing this during a pandemic is something that we're doing as well. So there's so many opportunities for us to learn. It's a conversation I'm constantly having with my teams and our organization. So, this is just the beginning. And if you ever have any sort of questions, please reach out to me because it's something that I'm super passionate about. All right, so let's talk a little bit about me. So, my name is Shani Boston. I use she, her pronouns. I am originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Whenever I talk about how I have ended up in the space that I've ended up in, I always kind of go with my why. I grew up, that man on the screen right there is my grandfather, Andrew Boston. And I always begin because, growing up, my grandfather actually started as a busboy and a cook on the Pullman railroads in the 1930s and 1940s. And it was there he kind of discovered his passion for cooking. And so when he left the railroad, he actually started his own catering company. And I remember when I was really young, I would take the long drive from Atlanta to Jacksonville, Florida. I'd open up the door and I'd be hit with this wave. Not only would it be the hottest place I have ever been in my entire life, but it would also smell so good, right? And for me, just being surrounded by that, I remember walking in and my grandfather would be in the kitchen and he would be either making cakes for someone's birthday, preparing, lunch for church service, or even, preparing repast for a dear friend that passed away. And it was for me, like, growing up around that type of passion that I understood that Black businesses, entrepreneurship, served a different role. It wasn't just about opportunity. It was about community, right? It was a sense of pride. It was a sense of family. And so for me, having that inspiration, I understood kind of the cornerstone that he played in my life and in my family's life. And so I took that passion and I said, okay, well, how do I help small businesses? How do I help entrepreneurs? Because it was hard for my grandfather, right? He was passionate about it, but he didn't have access to loans, right? He couldn't get the type of support that traditional businesses got. And so for me, I saw that opportunity. And so that's kind of what has driven me, I think, before I've joined into it, doing a lot of the federal legislation work that I've done, and then now building products and services for these type of entrepreneurs. So for me, it always kind of starts with my why, and it always starts with my grandfather. Okay, so with that in mind, I think the question is, what do I do every day? So I spend a lot of time really supporting product and engineering. Things that fall in my responsibilities are execution of our product roadmap, management of our company releases, overseeing technical program management, thinking about things like hiring wonderful individuals, staffing, budgeting, things like that. But I would say that the most of my time is really trying to bring teams together to deliver value for our customers. That's really the main thing that I'm focused on. So that's my job. This is what it feels like, though, right? Who can relate to this, right? Exactly. Yeah, I see some hands, because this is what I actually feel like I do every day, right? It's bringing so many teams together. People are always going different directions, right? They always have different ideas. And so I feel like I'm just that guy, just ask, please just come. Oh, we talked about this yesterday. Please come back. Just focus on this, right? And so that's kind of what my job feels like every day. But at the same time, I have a lot of fun. I love it. It's a challenge. There's nothing more fun than seeing teams be successful, coming together, delivering things for our customers. It's really, truly a passion of mine. So a little bit of a joke, but I'm gonna tell you, product engineers, y'all, it's not easy working with a group. So a little bit of my why, a little bit what I do every day, and then I kind of want to talk about my leadership style. So in a day before, or I guess a career before what I do now, I was actually a professional athlete, and I ran track. And sports was really something that was truly formative for me. It shaped how I understand teamwork, how to bring teams together, what does it mean to win, what does it mean to lose, how do you create inclusive environments, what does it mean to be a good coach, a poor coach, all of those things. That's kind of something for me that's been truly formative. The next is that I actually grew up in a military family. My father was a captain and a ranger and fought in Vietnam and actually has a Purple Heart, something I'm super proud of for him. But my father taught me something around humility. He taught me the importance that really respect is earned, right? It's not associated with the title. If you can't influence people before you get the title, when you get after it, you're not going to be successful. And a lot of that came from his time in the service. And so he really kind of instilled that in me. And it's something that I try and lead with every day. It's not always easy, but it's something that's really critical. And the third area for me is really inclusion. I am a queer Black woman. My experience in this world has shaped how I lead, what's important to me, what I focus on, how I try and create spaces for everyone's voice to be heard, because I truly believe that diverse perspectives make better products, better services, better communities, and better teams. It's just that simple. And so for me, those are the three things that have really shaped my style and the things that are important to me as a leader. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the change. Oh, here we go. Oh, no. Let's see, guys. So go back over here. All right, here we go. Okay, so who's familiar with MailChimp? All right, who's familiar with Intuit? All right, exactly. So for those who don't know, MailChimp was a privately owned company, never took any sort of VC money. It's been around for about 22 years. It's located in Atlanta, Georgia. It's traditionally a marketing company. And it's also, I don't know if you brand, I had it flashed up. We have like a playful, funny brand. We have a Freddy that we call, it's a little monkey. But it's kind of this playful, traditionally playful brand. Intuit is more of, it's publicly traded. It's been around for 40 plus years. A lot of the products are QuickBooks, TurboTax, Credit Karma. It's also located in Mountain View. It's a financial company. And to me, it's kind of more of your, I would say more prototypical tech company, right? And so since September 2021, we have been merging these two organizations. And so that is kind of the change, the context for what we've been going through. I think what's been interesting about the process is that, to begin with, I remember when I heard about it and I was there and I was like, oh my God, we're being acquired. I mean, MailChimp had been around for 20 years. People would always ask, the first time when I joined, I was like, are we gonna get acquired? Are you gonna sell? And I was like, no, never. We're never gonna sell. And a couple years in, boom, we get bought, right? And so I was kind of intrigued to be like, how are we gonna merge these two cultures? We're located in different places. But the things that have been really uniting us is more about who we serve. So if you have ever run a small business, you know traditionally QuickBooks is the standard for accounting. And so for me, that was also reassuring because it was like there's consistency in terms of who we target. MailChimp very similarly has targeted small businesses, right? Marketers. And so there was that kind of emphasis that was really important. In addition to that, I think I will be transparent with you. I was very ready to be skeptical about Intuit, right? And they have surprised me in how people forward the organization is. And MailChimp has been similarly that way. It has had a tremendous influence on the impact in Atlanta in terms of how it's shown up in the community. And the thing that I have really appreciated is that Intuit has not only done that, met that, but has amplified that as well and has been tremendously committed to maintaining MailChimp's presence in the Atlanta community. So, with that being said, I will tell you, the process has felt a little bit like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the old version, okay? Because I will tell you, MailChimp is a little bit different. We're a little quirky, right? We're a little odd, we're a little playful, right? We're located in Atlanta, okay? So that influences our style. And I have felt like at times, I had a coworker describe what the acquisition has felt like. It's like us showing up to Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil's house, and Beverly Hills is super nice, it's fancy, and we're there, and we're a little West Philadelphia, right? We're showing up, we got our own style, we do our things the own way. We're like, nah, I don't necessarily need that. And they're like, we gotta grow up a little bit, right? It's that process of kind of growing up a little bit. But you understand that there's value on both sides, right? There's value for being a little bit quirky, a little bit playful, right? Having some fun. And there's also some benefits to growing up and maturing your processes, right? And moving to the next step. And so for me, when my coworker described the acquisition like this, I about fell out and laughed because I was like, you're absolutely right. We're definitely a little West Philadelphia, mixing things up, and it's important, it's been good. So that's a little bit of a metaphor for kind of how some of the processes felt. All right. So let's just actually talk about the changes that we've been going through. So in September, we were acquired. In November, we got a new head of product. We then got a new head of design. We then got a new CEO. We then got a new CTO. And then recently, we've got a new head of partnerships, a new head of data engineering, and a new head of data products. In addition to that, we've also had a new head of people, a new CFO, and a new COO. So I say that to say we have been on a tremendous journey of change. right? The acquisition itself has been a change. And then we've also had changes in our leadership consistently over the last 18 months. What makes this difficult is that change is natural. It happens all the time. It's necessary. It's catalytic, right? It creates innovation, but it's also unpredictable, right? It's dualistic. It's stressful. It's unsettling. And to be honest with you, it's just hard, right? It's just hard. Even if you go into something like an acquisition with the best of intentions, you're excited, you have a growth mindset, you're really just prepared for it, it's still really difficult, right? Every single thing that I just talked to you about was a minor change. Well, it was a major change for all of us in the organization. We're getting new leaders, we have new priorities, we have new systems, we have new teams we're working with. We were a part of around 1,600 person organization. Now we're a part of a 15,000 person organization. It's just hard. It's just difficult. So I want to talk a little bit about my own personal journey. So one of the changes that you saw was that we got a new CTO. So prior to probably around November of this past year, I reported into the CTO, and I was ready for my one-on-one, and he'd been a friend of mine, Eric Muntz. He'd been a friend of mine but he'd been in MailChimp for about 12 or 13 years. And I remember I was preparing for my one-on-one, and I showed up on Zoom, and I was like, I had my list. I said, Eric, these are the topics I want to talk with you about. This is where I'm going. And he was like, Shani, I have to stop you. And I was like, okay. He was like, I'm stepping down as CTO. And when I tell you that I hit phase one shock hard, I hit phase one hard. It was one of the hardest things for me because Eric was not just my boss and a mentor of mine, he was my friend. And so I felt angry. I felt confused because I felt like, hey, we've gone through so much already. It seems like we're actually coming out on the other side. Like, why? Why now? What is happening? I was sad. I was sad to think that I wasn't going to be working with my friend anymore. And then I was scared. I had no idea. I had no idea where my team was going to report into, who the new leader was, what the implications of the change were going to be. And so it really, really hit me hard. And then I tried to go to phase two. I tried to explore the idea. Because mind you, I've been doing this already, right? We've had a new CEO. We've had a new company. We've had a new head of product. I've been doing all of this change, right? And so this one hit me really, really personally. So I tried to explore. I tried to say, how do I reconcile how I'm feeling? I have my team to lead. I have my own personal journey. This is changing my day-to-day. And so the thing that shifted me was when I had my second conversation with Eric. And he talked to me about it, and he said, Shani, I just want to do something different. I want to be happy. I've got to change. I've been here for 13 years. I've been pushing it. I'm so proud of all the work that the teams have done, but I'm just ready for something different. And I think for me, that second conversation really shifted my perspective because I knew instantly that, one, I want my friend to be happy. I want everyone to be happy. It's the most important thing, right? And two, I recognized very quickly that it wasn't about me. And that's a lesson for me in terms of the change that we've been going through and how to negotiate it, is that oftentimes change has nothing to do with you. It is completely out of your control. And so with that in mind, it kind of helped me start getting to phase three a little bit. I was like, all right, well, my friend is going to pivot and do something different. The new leader is going to be from Intuit. It'll make making some of these connections easier. I felt kind of relief because despite what I wanted to tell myself, I knew my boss was struggling. I knew he wanted to do something different. And so I kind of felt relief in knowing that, okay, he's going to be doing that. I'm going to be working with a leader who has a good sense and understands what needs to get done. And so I started getting excited. And then I had my first one-on-one with my new boss. And I prepared. I'm telling y'all, the weekend before, I was like, all decks and everything. And I was like, here's what we've been doing. Here's where we are, all the things. We had our one-on-one, and it was fantastic. I loved it. We worked very similarly. He understood the organization. He asked great questions. I felt really good. I felt excited. I truly felt excited. I said, okay, this is great. I'm going to be working with a leader who understands me. And then we had our second one-on-one. And there was nothing that happened in my second one-on-one with my new boss that was different. It was just different than what I had been doing. And so as a result, I found myself going back to phase one. I was sad again, because I remember I showed up and I was like, it's not what I'm accustomed to. I had a boss who understood me. We had trust. It was easy. And I showed up again in the second one-on-one with my new boss, and I didn't have any of that anymore. I'd lost all of that. And so I found myself right back to phase one. And so I remember in that phase, in that period of time, I started just beating myself up again, because I said, I felt positive about this. Why do I have to go right back? And I think for me, what I learned from that whole process is that have grace. Have grace for yourself. Have grace for your teams. Because the easier you are on yourself to negotiate that phase, like basically going through that, those 3 phases, the more your teams will be able to do that as well. And so for me, I just kind of took a breath. I stopped beating up on Shani. I said, you can't force yourself to be further along in the process than you are. And that actually helped me move past. So if there were 3 things that also, that for me that helped me kind of negotiate the change, and the things that I anchor on, that I work with my teams on, it's one, oftentimes change has nothing to do with you. It's not really about you. It can feel intensely personal, but oftentimes it's a business decision. It's someone's personal decision. And to remember that, to have grace for yourself, that even when you're negotiating it, even if you're angry, you're frustrated, you're all those things, you're always going through your own change process, even while your teams are going through their change process. And then I think the final thing is that to feel empowered, to feel like I'm on my own change journey, right? What do I need to get through this process? Take care of yourself. Because as much as you want to be a support for other people, you have to go through your own sort of process as well. And so it's important to remember that. So those were the things for me that, as all of these seismic shifts have happened, whether it's my boss stepping aside, whether it's getting a new CEO, whether it's partnering with hundreds of people across a new organization, I've just remembered and reminded myself every time that I'm always on my own change curve. My teams are on a change curve. It's not about me. It has nothing to do with me. I should feel empowered to negotiate my own process, right? Those are the things that have been consistent for me as we've been kind of negotiating this whole change. So I'm going to jump a little bit to some of the lessons learned. I think one of the things that happens in an acquisition that's interesting is that in the beginning, there's the shock that I talked about in the phases. Like, everybody is just shocked. And there's like grief. People really go through grief. It's interesting because I will tell you that the experience of the teams at MailChimp have been, you can almost draw a line from the individuals who are legacy, who have been around with the organization. They grew up through the organization. They could have started in support, ended up in engineering, and the people who have been hired in the last year and a half. There's just a completely different experience. And part of that is people who were hired in the last year and a half understand what they're walking into, right? Individuals who have been around MailChimp, who have built their communities, their families, their identities, have a completely different experience. And so when you're dealing with those kind of dueling experiences in a big acquisition, it's really tough. And so I remember in the beginning, the thing that we just wanted to do is like getting people past the shock is just getting back to work. But we made some mistakes, right? Because you can't just get back to work, because it is a change, right? You have new leadership, you have new expectations, it's just the reality. And so when we met as a product development leadership team recently, we realized that we skipped steps. We didn't even know each other. My old boss has this rule. He says, anytime a new person joins, you have to reform as a team. And so I just listed some of the changes that have happened across product, engineering, design, you name it, our C-suite, all of that. We did not know each other, right? And so what we did probably literally maybe 3 to 4 months ago is we took some time and we just said, hey, who are you, right? Like, what is your personality? What are your stress behaviors? What are you trying to accomplish? What frustrates you? What makes you successful? Right? Just get to know each other. And I think it's also complicated by the pandemic, right? So much of this stuff has been challenging, and we've been doing it in an environment that's abnormal for all of us, right? And so it became very clear that we didn't know each other very well, and we needed to spend time together. The next thing is that we had to be intentional about how we actually wanted to operate, right? Things were just happening to us. And so it was a time for us to take a step back and say, hey, listen, we have more control and more agency than we think we do. How do we want to operate? What are the things we want to do? What are the things we don't want to do? What is working? What is not working? And it sounds so simple, right? We do it every day, retros, whatever it is. But it was really kind of a poignant moment for us as a leadership group because it was something that we had not done. And a lot of it was because when you're trying to figure out how to enter in new information for HR so people can get promoted, like all of this stuff gets pushed to the side very quickly. And then we want to talk about a little bit of accountability. How do we hold each other accountable to making sure that we're working in a way that's building a high-performing team, that we're building a great culture? What does that actually mean, right? And so is it using engagement scores? Is it talking to our teams? It's obviously business outcomes, but that's not the only thing that we can control right now. And so for us, we really kind of had to take a step back as a leadership group and answer these questions because we didn't know each other. We weren't intentional about how we were operating, right? And we weren't holding each other accountable. And our teams felt it. And we felt it as a leadership group, right? And so we took the offsite, we took some time, and we just spent a week getting to know each other. And I know right now, in this kind of return to work, and everybody's trying to figure out what works for you, what works for your team, I just don't think there's a replacement for spending time with each other. It doesn't have to be all the time, doesn't have to be every day, but I do think there is some value of getting to know somebody, understanding them, seeing them in person, and really trying to work together with them as a team. So this whole process for us kind of manifested in super easy exercises that anybody has done a million times before. But when we started kind of saying, what are the things we wanted to change, we wanted to make sure our teams were doing activity that was actually measurable. So when I talked earlier about we were just trying to get teams back to moving, that was great, right? We got them saying, hey, let's get back to work. Like, I know this is disruptive, but at the same time, we had to make sure that the work that they were doing was actually valuable, right? Did it align with the new priorities of the organization, right? We had just had a new CEO step in who had kind of said, come in on day one, we're going to change our priorities, right? And so we had to make sure our teams were actually doing something that was impactful. We had to stop being reactive in firefighting. When you're in an acquisition, every day is a fire. Every day, someone is going through some sort of change process, it doesn't matter, right? You're constantly firefighting, and I think all of us realize we can't keep doing this, right? We have to start kind of sending the message to our teams to say, hey, listen, this is kind of the new reality. I will do what I can to make it as transparent and honest as possible, but it's ultimately up to you to decide whether or not this is something that you want to be a part of, right? And so we had to stop being reactive. We had to stop firefighting. I think some other things that we wanted to continue to doing start doing is more communication. In an acquisition, in the beginning, if you have to communicate 7 times in good times, in an acquisition, you have to do it 700 times. It's just the truth, right? Because there's so much information coming, and there's so many things that people are adjusting to, and people are in information overload. You just have to constantly say the same things over and over and over again. And this was something that we realized as a leadership team that we needed to do. We need to communicate our strategy more consistently, right? It was changing. Our priorities were shifting, right? How do we say this to our teams constantly over and over and over again? And then how do we actually enable our teams to talk about trade-offs, right? Because when you're ripping up your priorities and you're changing them, there are trade-offs, there are considerations. And so these were things that we realized as a leadership group that we were not making available to our teams, and it was impacting their productivity. The next thing is we were actually doing some things well. We were starting to get to know each other. We were pushing each other, and I think when I think of high-performing teams, working with people that you like actually helps. And so we realized that we wanted to continue to invest in those relationships, not just for ourselves, but even for our teams. And then we wanted to continue to work with speed. Velocity was one of our biggest measurements. And so we wanted to make sure that as a group, that's the thing that we continued to focus on, and we continued that momentum, because we knew when we were stuck, we were kind of in this one spot, and we could not let our teams go back. So this was a process that and this was just some of the things that we talked about, but these were the things that we were saying as a group and as a leadership team that we needed to rally around to kind of continue our teams through this process and this change journey. So then we just kind of defined our leadership principles. Said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about having a shared vision throughout the organization and get clear on that. And it's really interesting because in an acquisition, MailChimp had a great sense of itself. Intuit had a great sense of itself. But when you're on a process of actually trying to bring two products together, you have to create a new product vision, right? It has to be consistent, right? And so that whole process of actually creating a shared vision was something that we were still figuring out, right? We didn't know how are we going to talk about, QuickBooks users. Sometimes some of them are small businesses, some of them are accountants, right? How are we going to sell a marketing platform to those individuals, right? How do we actually bring the technologies together, right? They're vastly different. So, that was something that we realized moving forward that we had to push for our team. Again, it gets to the priorities. So much has been changing. Our teams were feeling kind of change fatigue, right? From the leadership to the priorities, to the product vision, to the roadmap, everything was shifting all the time. And a lot of that is just the nature of being a part of an acquisition. We wanted to have more clear roles and responsibilities. I think this was something that I was really excited about with Intuit. I think MailChimp, in its wonderful spirit of entrepreneurship, at times, role clarity, really having kind of mature people development practices was something that fell short. And so for us, we wanted to lean into that from the Intuit side, say, hey, listen, this is actually great because for your career, you have opportunities, you have mobility, and we want to be really clear with our teams on that. We wanted to continue to commit to speed. We realized that's the most important thing for us, is getting our product to market as fast as possible. And so we wanted to continue that and be rigorous in kind of the decisions that we were making and how we were making them. One of the things that I do think that MailChimp has always done, our former CEO, Ben Chestnut, and then I think Intuit does exceptionally well, is keeping the customer top of mind. So whether it's sort of customer panels, customer interviews, working with our customer team to help our high-value customers, whatever that is, we wanted to make sure that the customer's voice is always top of mind, the customer experience is always the thing that we're solving for. And then finally, I think some things that landed for us was, one, we wanted to make sure that we were creating kind of an environment of trust, of respect, and collaboration. It's really easy for all of those things to deteriorate in an acquisition. And it doesn't matter your intent. It doesn't matter how good of a person you are. People are going to perceive it one way or the other. And so we realized that no matter what we did, people were going to perceive it, but we realized it was still important. It was still important for people, for us, for our teams to try and be intentional about creating trust, about creating respect, about showing collaboration, and mirroring that as a leadership team so that teams could feel like they have some sort of stability in the work that they're doing every day. And then finally, we just said we want to be a high-performing team, right? We want to actually deliver on the things that we have. We have huge business goals. We're now accountable. We're a publicly traded company. I think the thing that I've always been excited about is MailChimp went through this amazing trajectory in terms of growth. And we're on the path of what is V2, right? What is the next level of that? And having spent some time at the organization, and when people have asked about, well, what did you think about the acquisition? It's really hard to do V2 in a self-funded way. It's very difficult. And so I personally felt like this was the only thing that I felt like could really kind of launch us into the next trajectory, at least give us the opportunity in a way to try and figure it out. And so that's kind of the path that we're on right now. And I think that's kind of the impetus, obviously, behind the acquisition. But that's the challenge, right? It's what is V2, right? What is the second version of MailChimp that our customers will fall in love with? How do we maintain some of the brand that people know, that they recognize, that's playful, but that's elevated, right? That's meeting our customers where they need to be met. And so that's really the challenge that we're building right now, and that's the product vision that we're building right now. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about myself, a little bit about leadership styles. I've talked about the change, two large organizations coming together. I guess for reference, how many people have been a part of an acquisition? Okay. With that group, how many people stayed as a part of the acquisition past 2 years? Yeah. Oh yeah, right? It's hard, you know? I really sometimes think I want to start like a support group for people that are going through acquisitions, because I'm like, yo, this is wild. Is anybody else feeling this? Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, it's hard, it's like, I would tell you that's the leadership challenge of my life right now. All the things that I've talked about are the things that I lean on every single day. I will say this, I think it's a personal journey, and I think that's the thing that has resonated with me, is that everybody has to choose what's right for them. And we're all consciously making that choice every single day. And the things that I've talked about, being intentional, like getting to know your teammates all over again, not skipping those steps, being intentional about how you operate and saying, here's the things I'm gonna do, here's the things I'm not being reactive in firefighting, understanding you can't pull people faster through the 3 phases of change any faster than they're willing to go, and understanding ultimately that it's kind of out of your control. Control what you can, right? Understand you're on your own personal journey as well, and take it day by day. So with all of that, I want to say thank you for letting me share a little bit of the bumps and bruises and some of the fun that we've been having at Mailship and Intuit. I'm super excited about what we're building, honestly, because of those 2 people who hung in there for longer than 2 years. That's why I'm hanging in there. But I truly believe that, you know, it's going to be a wild ride. If you see a book about this, it'll be me being like, please create support groups for people who are going through acquisitions in the middle of a global pandemic. Thank you. I appreciate it. The only other thing that I wanted to do is I'm a big Atlanta fan. I'm an AT alien. I've been here my whole life. I love it. And there's some pretty cool conferences that are coming up. One is Render Atlanta. It's put on by one of my friends, Justin Samuels. He's doing a lot to build the tech community in Atlanta. It's really important. It's diverse. It's representative of what the city has to offer. So if you have the opportunity to join it, hear about it, please go. It's super important. So thank you so much this morning. I hope I kept you awake a little bit. You got something out of it. The conference sounds amazing. I've heard nothing but wonderful things. So thank you for your time, friends.